Hello everyone, my name is Carl from Galatra Productions, and I'm here to tell you another VST plugin review called the Nexus 3 that was designed by Refx, Refx, as part of Vengeance Sound. The Nexus 3 is the latest updated version to the previous VST plugin from Refx known as Nexus 2. Okay. And as you can see on my FL Studio, you can see the significant changes of this Nexus 3 that was designed by the makers of the same plugin Nexus 2 to ensure that each electronic producer has total access to most of the sounds that each producer likes to create their own sound design or notation and any musical creation. Now, as you can see, the recent changes that Refx did with Nexus 3 is that all of the sound titles and patches or presets, as you call it, have been recently extended, okay, to make the producers see well and make it easier for each producer to look at the patches that they want to select, and as well as categorizing each sound category or wave to make it more convenient to which patches they want to audition for their next track project. Now, before I get to that, let's go ahead and take a look at the big difference from what Nexus 3 has compared to the previous version, Nexus 2. So I'm pulling up the picture right now of the older VST plugin version Nexus 2. As you can take a look here, this used to be the original layout. Excuse me. Now, the original layout had like a steel-like design, okay, that's white in color, okay, and of course I just took a picture of this before when I had this plugin, and you can tell by the screen itself it looked like it came from the a software version from their other sister company known as Access Virus, and this actually totally looks like from the Access Virus virtual analog synthesizer. Okay, as you can tell by the dials and the design itself, they're just pretty much similar to their actual hardware Access Virus synth. But as you can tell with this screen here, you can actually enlarge the text patches to make it bigger by like 3 notches, okay, and you still have like each of the folders here that are set by each folder in alphabetical order, where once you select this music patch folder, it will show you the rest of the patches that are organized in alphabetical order. Now, along here with the control knobs are pretty much subtle, okay, a little sleek within this side, as well as the amplified modeler knobs here, and then you got the meter that actually measures how much sounds you're putting out, okay, and also the volume knob here as well. And then here with the delays and reverbs effects, it's usually set up by a button here, okay, and then you actually can mix the the delay and the reverb effects by turning in the mix knobs. Okay. At the same time, you can change the timing and the delay, and along with the high and low cut, the low cuts and high cuts within each effects. And then normally the delay here has like about four four delay styles, like you see here: mono, stereo, class, and then ping pong. And then River has like only three, which is room, hall, and arena, during the time when the Nexus 2 was developed. Okay. And then same here with the master filter, where you got their actual cutoff and resonance knobs here. When you put this on, you only have like at least 4 types of master filtering effects, such as low pass, high pass, bypass, and notch, and etc. As well as you can change the low pass filtering for each stage. Now, since you can see here on this example with this previous version, now let's go back to the updated version. Now, what Nexus 3 has changed is that the knobs are located here. So, just to get a brief idea, what Nexus did change was they put like the delay and the filtering and the filter knob all the way on the left hand side, as well as the amplified mod on the right hand, as well as the reverb. Now, with the delay, I believe they still have the same delay effects, which you got mono, stereo, cross, and then ping pong. But on the reverb side, excuse me, Nexus added 4 more reverb effects to make your patches look interesting. And here we got the regular 3 effects, which is room, hall, and arena. But the newest ones now is nuclear, solar, nova, and space. So we'll get to those later on, okay? Because right now I want to show you some changes that Nexus 3 had made compared to the previous version, and then we'll play around with the sound patches in a moment. The latest update version that you can now do is that Nexus added 4 macro knobs on, you can see it on this lower left center, as well as the pitch wheel and then the modulation wheel. The previous version doesn't have this, okay, as you can see. So this is one of the complaints about with some producers, that they have no control with the pitch wheel and the modulation wheel changes in one of their music productions. So the only caveat here is that with the Nexus 2, you have to select modulation tab here in order to gain access to the modulation wheel setup. But here in Nexus 3, you can now have total access to change the modulation by moving the dial up, back, and forth, okay, to change the sound creation, okay, whatever effects or waveform or pidget or things like that to connect to the modulation wheel. Okay, so with the macro design, this is like sort of similar to like Serum's macro setup, but I have not had a chance to see how these effects will connect to the macros, since I just got this Nexus 3 a few days ago. But just to give an idea, it's kind of similar to like what you can do with Serum, but then again, most of the patches that you play out with Nexus 3 has only little effects to connect to the macros anyhow. Okay, but that will be later on during the moment. Now, the one thing interesting about the Nexus 3 is most of the effects from the previous version, some of the effects in Nexus 2 you cannot get access to, like the impulse effects or the changing the delays or reverbs. Well, now you can actually change the effects by going to this effects tab here. So now you have full control of either changing the filtering or the EQing or delay, as you can see. Okay, and you have the ability to change the frequency ratios in your sound patch and create like a new kind of sound that you cannot gain access to Nexus 2. So that's pretty a great feature of what Refx has done, because this has been another major complaint why some producers cannot gain access to all these effects from the Nexus 2, but now you can gain access to Nexus 3. Okay, so with that in mind, the other recent change that Nexus did do is you can now have full control with the arpeggiator patches. So for instance, like for this patch, I'm going to pull out the example, which is After Midnight, as I can play a little test here. Okay. When the sound is played through that arpeggiator, you can actually see the notes that's being played upon. But unlike the previous version, you can now have access to each of the arpeggiated layers on each of your sounds you selected with Nexus 3, and you can try to edit the sound notes or the trans gates or the volume design itself to make it look interesting. So for example, here with the After Midnight patch, you can see the notes that are being played once I play the regular C note here, which is this. And then so on when you access the second layer. Now, of course, with your arpeggiator line, you can still change the time speed here. Right now it's at default 1/16, but you can actually change it down to at least, let's say, 1/4, and now actually play like this sound here. Same thing with layer 2. You can actually change it to, like, let's say 132, and it should play like this. Of course, you don't hear the notes playing all together, but you can hear the background of the waveforms going really fast. Okay, which is why if you have like headphones or a good set of speakers, you can actually hear the difference when you select these kind of time signatures. So let's get it back to the default setting for now. Okay, because what else I want to show you here is how you can actually change the notes from the arpeggiator. So let's say I don't like to put it on the regular scale here as it shows whenever notes I'm playing. So if I want to change the note or the beat, then I can pull it up right here, and then it'll actually play like certain notes here for this layer, and then it'll come out like this. Yeah, I know it sounds kind of ugly, but then again, if you have like if you like to change the notes to your specific liking, then you'll pretty much be making like a good interesting song with this arpeggiator. But of course the idea is kind of the same. But either way, that's pretty much how the arpeggiator setup is like. Okay, especially when you want to change the volume tones here on either notes. Now, the next thing here is we can actually also select the layers of the notes that you wanted to, deselect or select the controls here where you want to hear each of the sound layers to play by its own design. And like this one, this is controlled by the arpeggiator. So if you turn this off, you only hear like the second layer coming in. And then same thing with this one. If you turn this off, you probably hear like just no playing. But in either case, if you put these back on, then it'll pretty much play the normal sound. And also, you can also try to turn this off too on the top, by the way, where if you press the first two layers, they only play out like the regular note sound, or the second wave patch, whatever it's controlled at. So that's one interesting way to see each of those patches, where you can actually control the wave forms or those wave selections to play out while you're making these tracks. The other the other section I want to show is the transgates here. So you have access to the transgates, and this is actually going to play out by all these bars that are selected here. That's being played by the arpeggiator. So again, same thing. You can actually change the time signature. Let's say that you want to play by 1/8, and also plays by that key. So it continues to play out until it actually ends the remainder. So that's one thing good about that. Now, one thing I did okay, that's better. So one thing I did notice is that with each of the patches that you're selecting, okay, the good thing is that Nexus 3 gives you a little preview of each of the sounds that you are selecting, and you can hear the audition that's being played out to see if the sound itself looks good for your next music project. So for instance, if I select a next patch, it plays an example note in the C line, and then same thing with this one. Now, of course, to select the patch, you can either two ways. You can now double click it, and that'll actually load up, or you can press your right arrow keyboard, and that'll actually help you select the patch. Okay, same thing with this one, and then so on. Now, once you select the patch that you like to put in your project, and you don't want to forget where it's located, you can now have the ability to put as a favorite by double clicking the heart symbol on the right, and that will actually save that patch directly to your favorites tab folder, which I have also here placed out in this section here. So that's why if I remember the patch that I like to select as a favorite, then definitely I will remember that that's where that folder is located. Okay, so that's pretty much what the layouts has been about. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about the next part about the reverbs. So for this same example here, right, they have recently changed the reverb controls as 4 new ones as nuclear, solar, nova, and space. So let's try nuclear for example. Now, as I try to turn off this knob, just to give an example, you probably might hear a noticeable difference how this nuclear reverse sound will sound like. Yeah, you pretty much hear like it's like a little bit expansive, but of course when dialing it down to like halfway, for example, then you have a difference. But we could try like another one, like solar here. Pull this all the way up, and then you'll hear this. And then same for Nova. And then space. Now, of course, each of these, like for example, like the solar and the Nova, it kind of gives like a little subtle reverb effect, which is kind of great, okay, for making like subtle or low-end electronic music lines. But either way, it might be also good for major EDM genres as well, okay, or sometimes also be such like hip hop. But in either case, like usually the room, the hall, and the arenas can still be acceptable room reverb effects when it comes to most common electronic genre projects. So now the interesting feature that I want to get back to the this part here, the pitch and the modulation wheel, is that of course the pitch, you probably much know that when you play a note like this one and then you pitch it up, you can actually hear the pitch going up, and then same thing going down, and then so on. But with the modulation wheel, you can actually see which parts of the effects are being changed as you turn off the modulation wheel. So for example, for this one, I noticed here that when you go back to layers, okay, or actually I stand corrected, it's actually modulation, you can actually see which effect is controlling the modulation wheel that's being assigned to. So as you can see, when I hold the modulation wheel all the way up, you can see certain changes up the sound patch that's being assigned to the modulation wheel. So let me play an example. So as you notice that this control here, the modulation wheel arc gate, is actually assigned to the modulation wheel, as you could tell by the word MW+. Okay, so you could do the same thing under this mod matrix here, is that you can actually assign another modulation wheel, okay, to whatever control that you wanted to modulate. So if you want to say you want to modulate an oscillator, for example, let's say oscillator 1 and then volume, then you have to arrange the dial of the settings here that you wanted to control the output. So same thing, let's try this for example. Let's put the same value, or you can just type it in, I believe. Yes, you can. So you can type it in, put like the same amount, see how this plays out. It's pretty much kind of the same, but I haven't gone over yet with that oscillator 1 control, but pretty much like once you get used to this, okay, it makes it more simpler to create your own sound designs. So that's one thing I like to point out. And oh yes, you can actually assign your patches here too based on these color coding designs. So it just explains why you have these like rainbow-like effects colors here. Yeah, that's why you have these rainbow-like effects colors here on the right to categorize which sounds are either dark, brighter, or so on. Okay, as you could select to each one of these, okay, by their own category designs. It's kind of simple, but anyways, you got the idea. Now, the next thing I want to point out here is that the significant changes of these patches, because unlike Nexus 2, okay, Nexus 3, some of the patches have been renamed from each of these categorical patch folders, but pretty much the sound is like similar or the same, except that some of them were detuned and others were like have like different sort of oscillator changes as this Nexus 3 was updated recently. So just to get an example of one parts of the sound from the Christmas line, okay, which I have to pull up in a minute. Okay, yeah, so here's one example. So for example, for this patch, like Liquid Moon, like once I selected this one, I noticed there were some issues with that patch where one of the sounds was detuned, okay, from the first oscillator. Okay, unlike the Nexus 2, this patch had like numerous reverbs, and the oscillator was kind of like set up to the max or something. But in this one, this is like almost cut halfway. So when you play this kind of note, like I noticed that the oscillation was detuned. So to do that, you just got to go back to the layers, and then here, like under this this setup here, you have to try to change the transposition to at least like a few dials down, okay, as well as the semitones here to make it to sound exactly like you had before with your previous Nexus 2 patches. But then again, if you feel like some of the patches do sound fine and they sound like normal for you, then that's perfectly fine. That way you don't have to do any recent changes or stuff. But that's one example that I want to point out in regards to that to those patch changes. So let's talk about now the price. Now the regular price of the Nexus 3 is $250 on Refx's website at www.refx.com, and usually that price is only assigned for first-time users that they would like to purchase this plugin for their hip-hop or trap or EDM and other pop genres. Excuse me again. That this program will be good for their latest musical trends. Okay, so once you update to this program, then you won't have access to the Nexus 2 before. Okay, and also when you purchase the Nexus 3, the great thing about it is that you don't really need to worry about using the Steinberg's e-licenser USB plug, where you have to connect it to the computer all the time to like access the Nexus 2 licensing program. So with Nexus 3, everything is now controlled, which I'll pull this up in a minute, is through the Refx's cloud service system. So when you pull up the Refx cloud app, this will show you the type of plugin that you installed for the Nexus versions, as well as the expansions on the bottom here that you can install within the cloud system without using the Steinberg licensing USB plug. Okay, because I know most of you producers out there, there's some significant trouble when receiving this plugin, especially when it's being like shipped from your shipping carrier, and that it has like shipping issues where you have to either pick it up or you have to validate your your information to know that this is you that actually purchased this Steinberg USB. But in any case, that's all long and gone, so you can now just download the Refx Cloud app, and that'll allow you to install this Nexus 3 plugin after you purchase it for your first time use. Now for the expansions here can vary from each various electronic genres that you can select for your productions, and usually some of these are free, but others, the regular price for each of those expansions at the time of this recording is still like up between $30 to $60. Okay, so the reason why I say that is because some of the plugins that are priced at $30 are like the older plugins that have been designed since like way back 7 years ago. But for the newer plugin sets, like for this example, like the EDM4, that's usually priced up to $60 for each expansion. Okay, so as you see at their website, they keep constantly updating their expansion sets. Okay, in their website here, which I can pull up right now. Okay, and the latest one right now is the Hip Hop 4 expansion. And when you get down to the Nexus category, you can see all of the expansions here that are specifically designed by category, and you can see the price of each of the expansions to select here. So you'll see on the top portion here, these are the latest plugin expansions that was designed by Refx. And as you get down here below, you'll see the older plugin sets that you can still purchase for up to $30. Now, as I mentioned before, each of these plugins are going to be assigned to the Refx cloud. So if you decided to purchase the whole set, you have to be prepared to pay for a whole price right here of almost $4,000. Okay, but then like if you want to just start out, you can just buy the whole set for $250. Okay, but in my case, when I first registered with Nexus 2, I only had to pay like an upgraded version for only $99, which is pretty sweet. So I did that, and the reason why I decided to update my Nexus plugin is because I noticed there are certain bug issues when opening the Nexus program onto my FL Studio, and sometimes it kind of like a little crashes. But for this one, for the Nexus 3, I had little issues with this software synth, and it pretty much does a good job in selecting the sounds that I wanted to play for my musical projects. Of course, itself, the layout is kind of like a little boorish, but on the other hand, I believe Refx will start updating their plugin skins, excuse me, to change the plug-in layout of this whole design to make it look more like the previous version, but more either shinier or more like what Silent 1 did for Leonard Digitals or Serum. Okay, so with that, all due respect, let me give you my opinion about why the $99 price was kind of a big deal to me. Okay, for those who think if Nexus 3 will be like a good choice for the latest EDM musical trend. Now, to me, in my opinion, the Nexus 3 is still a good choice for most beginner producers that want to try out each sound to explore or to combine most of their musical projects into one batch. But I know the price was $250 is kind of steep, but for those who are starting out, I do encourage you to start getting this one. But for those who have the previous Nexus 2 plugin versions, I also highly suggest to start purchasing that upgrade as much as you can. Okay, because once the updates to Nexus 2 phase out, then there's no way of telling whether those sounds will start jumbling or bugging out. Okay, since Refx will only continue to make improvement updates with this Nexus 3 version. Okay, so as for the expansions, my biggest tip here is don't buy all the expansions at once. Okay, just try to buy it one at a time, so that way you don't get overboard with the expensive options. Okay, if you don't have any time to play around with each of those expansions that don't suit your musical projects. Okay, so whatever project you feel like that you want to produce, and you feel that the sounds are okay for each of the plugins that you play around with their demo, then you can purchase those plugins and go for it. Okay, so that's why I want to point out my idea with the Nexus 3, why it's still a good plugin for today's musical genres, because after all, the Nexus 3 can still continue to thrive for most musical productions. But keep in mind, okay, it's all about what you put into your musical content. Okay, it's not about having the best sounds or having the most expensive project set of all time, and later on things will not work out later on in the near future. So you just have to, you know, experiment and just take it one step at a time to make those musical tracks happen. So as I leave off with this review, I'm gonna play like the new sound sets of the Nexus 3 presets that Refx made up, and this is known as ROM Expansion 2. Now, ROM Expansion 2 is now included when you purchase the Nexus 3 the first time, but for those who bought the upgraded version, this will be included as well in the Refx cloud system. So I'm gonna leave this off for the remainder of the review. So what I wanted to say here is I do thank you for listening to my video review for this Nexus 3 program. And if you like this video, please give a like and subscribe to my channel for more latest VST plugin review updates, and also some latest musical sets that I made under the artist name is Galatra in my Galatra Productions YouTube channel. So I do appreciate for visiting my channel. So stay safe, okay, and stay healthy, and enjoy this last piece of the video review, where I'm going to play each of the new sound presets from this ROM Expansion 2 sampler from Nexus 3. Enjoy. Of course, you can see that the first new presets, those are the 808 drum kit boom kits. Okay, so that's all the new presets that are made by Refx. So I do hope you all enjoyed this video. So please give a like, share, and subscribe. and I hope you have a wonderful day. You take care. Bye-bye.